Those who voted against the citizenship law from Bibi through TB and until Chikli have chosen small politics over what is best for Israel's citizens. And now, for a long time, they will need to justify their act to Israel's citizens.
Well, let's bring in Daoud Kuttab. He's a Middle East analyst. He's joining us from Amman. Mr. Kuttab, always good to speak with you, sir. So, your thoughts then on the fact that this law has not been extended?
Well, this law is a racist law that was issued right after the Israeli invasion or re-invasion or occupation of the West Bank. And it had to be renewed every year by 61 votes. And so a majority of 61 had to vote on it. And I think the crazy Israeli politics in which Netanyahu and the United Arab Joint List were together with some of the other groups made sure that this law failed. But I'm not sure that the problem of family reunification will be resolved totally. I think it's going to be more difficult now for the security services to justify not allowing Palestinian families to be united.
And you say more difficult. I do wonder whether the law will be struck down entirely. Do you see that happening possibly?
Well, this is a basic law, and a basic law is almost like a constitution. So the fact that they did not renew it, and they have to, by law, renew it every year, I think makes it more difficult for the security forces to arbitrarily deny every single Palestinian married to a person who lives in Israel. And I think this was always a racist law, and it's about time, after 18 years of unjustly keeping families divided, for this law to be off the books. It's a shame that this had to wait this long, and should never have been allowed to pass in a country that claims to be a democracy.
Absolutely. Mr. Kuttab, I mean, you mentioned it as, or described it rather, as crazy Israeli politics. Did you ever think that it would be Bibi Netanyahu who was on the side of getting rid of this law in this regard?
Well, Netanyahu is arguing to his supporters that this particular government is a left-wing government. In fact, it is not a left-wing government at all. But there are some elements from the left-wing. There are people who do not agree with the right-wing philosophy. It's a coalition from the far right to the far left and everything in between. And so to use this law as a way to explain that this coalition is totally not with the right wing is a bit of a stretch. I think this was a unique law that should never have passed in the first place, and I'm glad that this law is in the dirt bins forever.
Okay, and finally then, Mr. Kuttab, what do you think this tells us about the strength of this governing coalition? It's defeated essentially in this case. What do you think it's got left? Is it, as some people think, going to see itself fall in 6 months' time?
Well, I think there are lessons to be learned. I think the coalition should understand that they cannot push down the throats of their own coalition members a law that is racist and it's against their own policies. So they have to start working harder on finding common ground with all their elements of their opposition before they would they pass a law. I think they need to learn a lot more about how governments run, how a coalition run, and what it means to have a coalition government. It means you have to find common ground. It's like a marriage. You have to find compromises, and the compromise that they suggested is a very bad compromise, and that's why it failed.
Okay, Daoud Kuttab, always appreciate your analysis, sir. Thank you for being with us.